Hello everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into the Sermon on the Mount. Today we are exploring a section that really challenges us to look beyond our outward actions and examine the state of our hearts. Jesus has this incredible way of taking what people thought they knew about God's law and revealing its true, profound depth. He consistently elevates the standard from mere external compliance to a matter of internal purity and intention. It's not just about what we do, but why we do it and what's going on inside our minds and hearts. So get ready as we step into Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 32 from the New International Bible. We are going to tackle two very interconnected and sensitive topics, adultery and divorce. These were hot-button issues in Jesus' day, and they remain so today. Let's listen closely to his words and be open to how they can transform our understanding and our lives. Let's begin with verse 27. Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.'" This is, of course, the seventh of the 10 Commandments, a law everyone listening would have known by heart. It was a clear, direct prohibition against a specific physical act. For many, simply avoiding this act meant they were righteous in this area. But as we've seen throughout this sermon, Jesus is about to go much, much deeper. He continues in verse 28, "But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Wow, right there, Jesus changes the game entirely. He says the issue isn't just the physical act. It begins in the heart with a look. The key word here is lustfully. This isn't about simply noticing someone is attractive. This is about looking at someone who is not your spouse with a desire to possess them, to use them for your own gratification. It's an intentional, covetous gaze that objectifies another person, reducing them from a soul made in God's image to an object of selfish desire. Jesus is telling us that for God, who sees the heart, this internal sin is just as serious as the external one. The thought is the seed of the action by addressing the root cause. The lustful heart. Jesus is calling us to a higher standard of purity that involves our thoughts and intentions, not just our actions. Now, what's the solution? Jesus gives a very radical and shocking illustration in verses 29 and 30. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Now, let's be very clear. Jesus is using hyperbole, a form of dramatic exaggeration, to make an unforgettable point. He is not commanding self-mutilation. If he were, a blind person could still lust in their heart, and a person with no hands could still sin in other ways. The eye and the hand represent the gateways and instruments of sin. The eye sees and covets, and the hand acts upon that desire. The message is about the radical, urgent, and decisive action we must take to deal with sin in our lives. If something in your life, a relationship, a habit, what you watch online, where you go, is causing you to stumble into sin, you must cut it out of your life ruthlessly. Don't negotiate with it. Don't manage it. Remove it. The spiritual stakes are eternally high. It is far better, Jesus says, to experience loss and difficulty in this life by removing the source of temptation than to allow that sin to fester and ultimately lead to eternal separation from God. This is a call to spiritual surgery, to be ruthless with our sin because sin is ruthless with us. Next, Jesus transitions to the related topic of divorce, starting in verse 31. It has been said, "Anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce." Jesus is referencing a passage from Deuteronomy 24. In that context, the provision for a certificate of divorce was actually a form of protection for the woman. It wasn't intended to make divorce easy. In that culture, a man could dismiss his wife for almost any reason, leaving her destitute and shamed. The certificate was legal. Proof that she was not an adulteress but was divorced, allowing her the possibility of remarrying. However, by Jesus' time, some religious leaders had twisted this rule to create loopholes, essentially allowing for divorce on demand for trivial reasons. They focused on the paperwork, the external process, while ignoring God's original intention for marriage. But then, Jesus restores the original standard in verse 32. "But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." This is another incredibly hard-hitting statement. Jesus raises the bar right back to God's original design: one man, one woman for life. He says that divorcing your spouse for any reason other than sexual immorality or unfaithfulness is not a legitimate divorce in God's eyes. Let's break this down. He says that if a man divorces his wife on unbiblical grounds, he causes her to become a victim of adultery. How? Because in God's eyes, they are still married. If she remarries, she is entering a union while her first one is still valid before God, thus committing adultery. And by extension, the man who marries her also commits adultery. Jesus is showing the devastating ripple effect of a broken covenant. He's not primarily blaming the woman here. In fact, the original language suggests she is made to suffer adultery or is placed in an adulterous situation by her husband's illegitimate action. His point is to show the profound seriousness of breaking the marriage bond. Marriage is a covenant, a sacred promise made before God, not just a contract that can be dissolved at will. The only exception he gives here is a breach of that covenant through profound sexual unfaithfulness. So what is the big picture here? In both of these passages, on adultery and divorce, Jesus is doing the same thing. He is calling us to look past the letter of the law and see the spirit of the law. He is calling us to honor God's design for purity and covenant. First, purity is not just about avoiding a physical act. It's about cultivating a pure heart. This starts with guarding our eyes and our minds. It means we must be intentional about what we consume and where we allow our thoughts to wander. And when we find ourselves stumbling, we must take radical, decisive action to remove the temptation. It's a call to holiness that starts from the inside out. Second, marriage is a sacred covenant designed by God to be permanent. Jesus takes a culture that had made divorce easy and reminds them of the sanctity and permanence of the marriage bond. His teaching protects the institution of marriage and calls its participants to a high level of commitment, faithfulness, and perseverance. It underscores the pain and spiritual damage that divorce causes. These teachings are not meant to condemn us, but to call us to a higher, better way of living. A way that honors God, respects others, and leads to true human flourishing. They are challenging, without a doubt. We all fail. We all have impure thoughts. We all know people affected by divorce. But the high standard Jesus sets is meant to drive us to Him. We can't achieve this level of heart purity on our own. We need His grace. We need the transforming power of His Spirit to change our desires and heal our brokenness. If you are struggling with lust, confess it to God and perhaps a trusted Christian friend, and take radical steps to remove the source of temptation. If your marriage is struggling, seek wise, godly counsel and fight for it with everything you have. And if you've been impacted by sin or divorce, know that there is forgiveness, healing, and restoration found in Jesus. His standard is high, but His grace is even higher. Thank you so much for joining me today for this study. I know these are difficult verses, but they are so important. I pray they have challenged and encouraged you. Don't forget to like this video if it was helpful, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of our journey through the Sermon on the Mount. See you next time. Search for Jesus at HaroldSwaney for the complete library of my Bible study series.